think a key is how did you approach GDPR in the outset in terms of awareness and raising it? If people felt, or if the board felt like the 25th of May was the end, and then you've got a bit of an uphill struggle, which is trying to actually claw back some ground. The 25th of May was a start. And most organisations actually were able to share that with the board, saying, look, we are getting us to a position where we have to achieve a certain level of compliance and then demonstrate against it. So key things to do is trying to keep privacy. Maybe GDPR is sort of overdone now. So privacy by design is something which is the way you actually the organisation starts thinking about data, thinking about how different processes, different IT and the like. There are also things such as the budgets you've already set up as part of your DPOs. They should be actively being worked, and again, they shouldn't be dependent on having to get them sourced every year. There's things which we need to be able to report against breaches. Breaches are far more visible now and we need to be a lot more transparent. A board and particularly the senior management need to still be aware of how many breaches, what are they like, are they notifiable? Compliance isn't a given. Legislation moves on. Legislation such as e-privacy, which probably was overlooked a little bit because it wasn't fully landed, but that needs to be actually woven back into GDPR. And how does it affect our cookies? How do it affect our stance online, and how are we consenting against both those items? If you think the job is done, and if that's been communicated to the board, then unfortunately you're going to have to actually go back and say we've got some more work here. We need to actually start. This is the beginning of a journey. It's not the end of the journey, and there's a lot more work to be done. Okay, so demonstrating compliance is a requirement now to GDPR. Beforehand, people wrote policies and said, yes, we've got them, and it's only when you actually had an event where people were started to be tested. And there are many factors now within the GDPR which say you need to be able to actually show that you do this. You can't rely on the fact that you have a policy. You have to a policy has to be written, you've got to train against it, and you've got to check that people are actually following that policy, just as one example. A key thing which I think would work is within the data protection network within your organisation, the Data Privacy Office, is to have set targets for evidence, such as, do you have a mandate? Has a mandate been provided to the data protection officer? Do you have a process in place for subject rights, breach management, and many things such as that? There are a number of different frameworks out there. I think NIMITY do a large one, which is a great approach. Again, now I would balance it between your organisation and the size of your organisation and your needs and what you do and what you do with personal data. But the trick is a regular cadence, getting evidence in place, making sure you're updated, and recognising that things will go out of date, and not refreshing everything, but refreshing the stuff that is likely to be needed to be renewed. So compliance and differentiator is a great concept. But I think that you find that everyone's raised the bar. GDPR has meant that most organisations, or all of them, should have achieved a higher bar. So it's great that organisations feel very proud of what they've achieved, but they have to be very careful that what we've achieved, the bar, is now the norm again. So if you are going to differentiate through privacy, the things which I think you need to focus on is very strong governance, the board being involved, the board being still very engaged with privacy, wanting to differentiate. Transparency is another big area. If you're uncomfortable sharing what you do use personal data for, then maybe you shouldn't necessarily consider yourself as a differentiator in that area. Compliance is almost a given. If you don't feel you're compliant, then again, areas you need to look at are the touch points. You've got privacy notices, you've got breach, you've got subject rights, contracts. All these areas need to be really closely looked at to see if you are actually differentiating in this area. The one thing which should be very clear to individuals within this new environment is if you're not achieving the minimum which people expect, and again, if you put yourself out there as being a differentiator and being sort of a leader in privacy, then you have to pretty much make sure you are. Otherwise, there can be plenty of data protection authorities who are going to come looking at people. The key is that data and personal data will continue to grow in its use. There's so much value from using personal data, from knowing what customers like, what patterns are, what trends are within its data, that it's always going to be used more. The GDPR has raised the bar in terms of compliance, particularly around things such as secondary use and visibility around privacy notice and transparency on how you use personal data. you can't be reactive anymore. You have to actually be proactive, and privacy by design is a way for doing that. People within those systems can then start looking at being innovative within a certain sort of ring-fenced area. They're the things you need to start thinking about so that you can keep ahead of compliance and keep ahead of the fact that there's so much value in using personal data to actually promote your product and make sure you're giving customers what they want.